We're going to get started here.
Bang that gavel.
You want to hear the gavel? Yeah.
Use the gavel.
Yeah, let's give it.
If everybody can grab their seats, we're going to get started here.
Down, shut up, then. Is that what you're saying?
Good evening and welcome to the July 26th, 2023 Board of Education Special Work Session. The meeting is now called to order. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
This is a roll call vote.
Director Newman,
Aye.
Director Merschbrock,
Aye.
Director Roundtree,
Aye.
Director Borcherding. I believe Director Borcherding is not able to make it tonight. Director Humbles,
Aye.
Director Garlock, are you on with us? Director Garlock maybe. Director Garlock is over phone, and President Kaminsky.
Aye. And then Mayor O'Donnell. Yeah, if you wanted to call your meeting.
All right, we'll call the meeting of the Cedar Rapids City Council to order in collaboration with the school board today. So I'll do a quick roll call vote. Councilmember Scott Olson.
Aye.
Councilmember Tyler Olson.
Aye.
Councilmember Ashley Van Orney.
Present.
Councilmember Dale Todd. Councilmember Pat Leffler. Councilmember Scott Olson, or Scott Overland, apologies.
Here.
And Councilmember Ann Poe.
Just in time.
All right, thank you. We are called to order.
Great, thank you, Mayor. First and foremost, I just want to welcome everyone to this joint meeting. I've only been on the school board since 2019, but this is the first time this has ever happened. So pretty exciting opportunity, I think, to bring both of our groups together for an important conversation for this community. The only agenda item is an update and conversation about the facilities master plan with the Cedar Rapids City Council. Tonight, our focus is on the facilities master plan. As Dr. Grover stated at our last meeting, at the last school board meeting, the time is now to invest in our kids, schools, and the city. We all know an investment in our schools is an investment in our city. This is a great opportunity to bring well-meaning entities that care about our kids together. I will turn the meeting now over to Dr. Grover and John Galbraith to get us started.
Thank you, President Kaminsky. I do want to thank our Board of Education for being here tonight, as well as the members of our City Council and your staff as well. And so, of course, you all know that I'm very new here, so I have a 2-for-1 tonight. I get a chance to meet all of you all as an introduction to the community. So thank you so much for joining us for this important conversation. Tonight, we'd like to come together to more or less provide some information as it relates to our comprehensive facilities master plan. This is really an opportunity for us to share with you because just as President Kaminsky just stated, we know that our schools are an integral part of our city and that we cannot do this work alone without you. We really do appreciate that you've had representation on our facilities committee with Councilwoman Van Orney, is it? Right, thank you so much. But tonight is wonderful for us that we have all of us here together for a collective understanding. I do believe tonight that we can walk away knowing that we had a successful meeting when we are more informed on both sides. We're able to hear from you, you're able to hear from us. That we also understand the needs as well as the complexities and the challenges. And hopefully, the more we have additional conversations, we'll be able to find those intersections for collaboration and how we all come together, because just in the short time that I've been here, I know that we want Cedar Rapids community to be a shining star. We want to be an example. We want to be a leading choice for the families within our area. And I'm excited to present our updated plan to you, but moreover, we are definitely encouraged by the opportunity to hear your feedback, your questions, how we can gain greater clarity, and how we can propel the vision forward. I'll turn it over to John.
Sorry.
Before you do that, Mayor, did you have?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Just on behalf of the council, I just want to express our thanks to the school board for convening this group together. It is a first, certainly in my brief time as mayor, and an official welcome to Dr. Grover. We've had 2 lovely meetings, just getting to know each other and learning more about her priorities. And it is clear that she has the best interest of our students in mind. And I look forward to learning more about this plan. Full disclosure, the city council received materials this week from the school board on this plan. So my expectations for this meeting are for us to be here to learn and listen from you, hear your intention around these plans, and have our questions answered and maybe some thoughts shared as well. So again, I appreciate this opportunity for us to look at this for the first time with you collectively.
Thank you, Dr. Grover. Thank you, Mayor, for getting us started. John, turn the meeting over to you.
Thank you, President Timinski. So I'm going to kick off the presentation here, and then we also have Rob Schwartz from RSP, who's our district demographer. He's joining us via Zoom. He'll take over in the middle, and then I believe Dr. Grover will wrap us up in the end here. Tony, can you advance to the next slide? There we go. We'll start with a little bit of history. So you'll see up there 2000, year 2000 was the last time the Cedar Rapids School District had a general obligation bond on the ballot, and it was the last time that a bond was passed. So 23 years it's been since we've asked our community for the support of a general obligation bond. 2 years later, we opened Viola Gibson Elementary School. And we'll fast forward here 14 years to a little more recent history. 2016, we had a facilities task force that convened. That was very shortly narrowed down to what has kind of been known as our elementary plan that was funded through our statewide sales tax, our SAVE fund. 2018 is when that plan was put into place. 2021, we knew in 2018 when we came up with that elementary plan that we would have to reconvene a task force to address our needs at our secondary level. In 2021, we brought that task force back together. Also in 2021 is we paid off our existing GO bond debt. So currently now the Cedar Rapids School District does not have any general obligation bond debt. In 2022, that task force came up with a secondary plan, and now here we are in 2023 with an updated facilities plan. So in 2022, we'll dig into a little bit of the details. What did that plan include? It included a land acquisition for a middle school. We said that that would be somewhere in the north side of our school district. A new building on that site, 1,200 student middle school. A new building, 600 students at the Wilson site. A renovation of the existing Franklin building for 600 students. An initial renovation at Taft, we knew that that would be an initial plan, a very small chunk there, and then knowing we would have to come back at some time in the future to do a much larger renovation or a new building at that Taft site. We were going to address the middle school tracks and fields at 5 different locations. High school activity areas, those activity areas are the existing pool spaces within our 3 comprehensive high schools. There would be renovations done to those areas. The addition of turf fields to our 3 comprehensive high schools, a renovation of the Kennedy kitchen and cafeteria area, updates to the Metro gym, and then a new aquatic center, which that pairs with the high school activity area. So that's where we were in 2022. So what did we hear? What was the feedback we heard after presenting that plan? There was concerns about closing McKinley, both from the Board of Education and from our community. As we dug into some data around that, the student population density between McKinley and Johnson is the highest that we have in the city. So the data confirmed what the concerns were from the community and the board. Equitable resources for students. Those resources include transportation, community resources, and supports. We heard there was confusion about the elementary plan and the secondary plan, that we kind of had 2 plans that were running in parallel, but it was hard to understand. There was questions about the aquatic center. Will it work to have one central pool for our 3 high schools and our middle schools? How will kids be transported to get there? Where will it be located? Is there another organization that we can partner with? So just lots of questions that weren't quite answered around the aquatic center. There was affirmation of a feeder system to maximize our building efficiency to address enrollment and our building capacities. Historical buildings. In this plan, there is no historical significant buildings that will be demolished. And the need for college and career readiness for our students. So how we adjusted? In the 2022 plan, we had a land acquisition of a new site. That's the same in the 2023 plan. We had a new building on that new site. That moves over to the 2023 plan as well. New turf fields at our 3 high schools, again in 2022, and that moves over to our 2023 plan. Kennedy kitchen and cafeteria renovation, same thing, moves directly over from 2022 plan to 2023. Along with the Metro gym updates, those move over as well. Franklin renovation, originally that was going to be a renovation to support 600 students. Now that'll be a renovation to support 800 students. A new aquatic center in the high school activity areas. That was originally a brand new aquatic center, renovating all the 3 high school activity areas. We're still looking to do that, but we're looking for a partner to be able to do that with. And then in the 2022 plan, that left 3 items that aren't moving over to the new plan. That's the renovation at Taft, that was a new building at Wilson, and that was track and field updates at our middle schools. So what's changed now in the 2023 plan? Instead of doing the initial renovation and then long range asking another ask to put a new building or a larger renovation at Taft, we're asking to do a new building at the Taft site right away. We're also shifting to do a renovation for a 6th grade academy at McKinley, and that would support 400 students. And then also to answer the question on career and college readiness is CTE additions to our 3 high schools. So how do we fund this plan? So as we look at the screen on the left, we have $209 million from our SAVE fund, and that's the sales tax that's currently funding our elementary plan. I'm going to say third from the left, our PEPL. There'd be $174 million from our PEPL, our physical plant and equipment levy, to fund this plan. And then we would have 2 separate bond asks for this plan. Phase 1 there, $220 million, and we're proposing a vote in November of 2023. And then a second ask in 2029 for $225 million. So as I mentioned the previous slide, we're going to break the ask down for the general obligation bond into 2 phases, 2 separate asks. So here's the projects that would be included in the first bond ask in 2023, this coming November. The new site acquisition and building, the CTE additions, the turf fields, the renovations to the Kennedy kitchen and cafeteria, updates to the Metro gym, and the renovations to the 7th, 8th grade building at McKinley. That would be the $220 million, which is a levy rate increase of $2.70. Remember, currently the school district has $0 in our general obligation bond levy. So for phase 2, a proposed vote in November of 2029, that would include a new building at the Taft site for 1,200 students, and then renovations to the 6th grade academy at McKinley, which would be a 400 student building. That would be in total of $225 million, and that would just be an extension or a continuation of the $2.70 levy. We would not be asking for an additional raise in that levy, but instead to be able to continue that levy for a longer period of time. So here's a chart of the levy rates, the school levy rates of all the school districts that are in Lynn County. So Cedar Rapids is second from the left at $14.66. So we rank second lowest in Lynn County with what our levy rate is. If we add our $2.70 that we're proposing to that, that would put us at the 1733 mark. So as you can see, that still puts us very comparable to the rest of the districts within the county. Now I'm going to turn it over to Rob from RSP, who's joining us virtually to talk a little bit about enrollment data.
Right, good evening. Can I get a thumbs up that you see my stuff up on the screen?
Yes.
Outstanding. All right, thank you. I'm bringing this to you from Kansas City. A little bit, if you are not familiar with RSP, we've been doing work in your community since 2010 and 2011. We exclusively work with school districts. Across from me is our newest statistician, Lucy Crum. She's sitting in just to see how all of this comes together as she works through some of our analytics in the next round of your district. Again, I mentioned we exclusively work with school districts, specifically with how do we take information and take that in a data essence and create a storyline of what's happening in the district. So data-driven process. We have a full report that's gone to the school district that's 77 pages. This evening, I'm not going to go over all 77 of those pages. I'm going to hit some highlights and focus on some things that will maybe enlighten you and provide information to why the plan has evolved to the state that it is for the secondary. And we'll talk a little bit about the elementary. The key thing in this report is data. It's data from your community. It's data that we've received from some of your city planners, from the building tours. In fact, I was there last week for 2 days looking at some of the things specifically in the Nubo and downtown area on what those developments may do as far as impacting our enrollments. This report is broken up into 4 specific parts. The first part is about enrollment and demographics. The second part with developments. The third is our projections. And the fourth for the district, what are our next steps? There's a lot of information that's in the appendix. And so that will be something that, again, when you get the full report, look at that. So initially, this 100,000-foot perspective, we have the enrollments where it will increase a little bit over the next 5 years. Capacity has some varying impacts through the district, but doesn't integrate how the plan will influence what that means for capacity or where kids go to school. That's something as we move to the point where the community approves what needs to be built, then that can be integrated in. There's quite a bit of development activity that's happening in different places of your community. So in the city of Cedar Rapids, up in Robbins, Hiawatha, and even in Paola, or Palo. We provide visuals that help give context to the data. So the next series of maps provide that context of the Cedar Rapids School District. And usually in the bottom right-hand corner, we give the extent where you see the entire district. So it goes quite a bit to the north and to the west. The hard part of the map is zoomed into the core area where we see students in different activities. You'll see a breakdown of the elementary attendance areas, the middle school attendance areas, the high school attendance areas, and then we further break the district into planning areas. But to get a sense of how all these attendance areas play with each other, we've shown a feeder system here. And so way back in 2010, 2011, one of the goals when there was an impossibility to have a complete feeder that would go from your elementary buildings into your middle schools and into your high schools, we created a system where at that time the elementary attendance boundaries would completely feed into the high school. Some of the things in this transition period with the elementary plan, it's resulted in 2 buildings, Harrison and Maple Grove, to be broken when we think about the elementary attendance area and how that's reflected to the high school. I mentioned these planning areas. This is where the data comes in. So every piece of data, whether it's census data, student data, city data, all gets built into these planning areas. And so on this map, we're showing an aerial. There's a green line that represents the planning areas. We have probably 500 planning areas that we're monitoring what happens with enrollments, development, and demographics. That's key because on page 13, this is our statistical formula that generally outlines what happens in each of those planning areas, whether it's built out or it's an emerging area where we're seeing building activity. Again, I've listed quite a few of the sources here on page 13. Data, data, data is our focus. We start with live birth information. This sets the context of what we potentially might see for future kindergarten classes 5 years later. One of the things that we tried to hone in on for this particular forecast was the impact of COVID and what did that mean for live births. Here we're focusing on Lynn County. The purple part of the bar represents the live births in Lynn County. And then 5 years later, for these orange parts of the bar, that's the number of kindergartners we had. So this gives us a sense of what our market share of live births to kindergartners 5 years later. Of note, if babies were born in October, November, and December, they're not going to be kindergartners 5 years later, right? They'll be too young. So that's part of the mix of when live births happen and what we see for the number of kindergartners. We have looked forward with the live births and see they've declined to just under 2,600 live births. So that potentially has an impact on what we see for future kindergartners in the next 5 years. It's good data. We look at the page 15, we're showing what the enrollment is for students that are served by Cedar Rapids School District. There's more students that live within their district that go to private, parochial, or homeschool. But what this takes us through is the last school year and by grade. And so we can see that there's, I would say, stability in the number of students in the elementary. And we have some bubbles of students when we get to 9th grade of this nearly 1,300 students and about 1,200 students that are in 10th grade. What I quickly look at in a table like this is the graduating seniors. How does that compare to incoming kindergartners? So 2 years ago, we had 946 seniors, and then we brought in 1,172 kindergartners. So that is an increase in students that naturally can happen. We just have to watch some of these larger classes. How we start to monitor that is what we're seeing with enrollment change as those grades cohort forward. And so on this particular table, it's looking at the previous data and it's showing how that enrollment changed year to year. What I really wanted to highlight to you all is there have been some of these enrollment changes that were occurring prior to COVID. So where I see red numbers, this is where enrollment decreased as they moved through the system. And if you follow the columns, like from 9 to 10, you see we consistently have seen enrollment decreases. So again, there's something that has been always happening in the Cedar Rapids School District with some of these enrollments. And to what extent, some years it was more of a decrease, some years it popped into an increase. But again, this is just giving you a sense of what's happening district-wide with enrollment for students the school district serves. We also focused on, from the pandemic, we had some shifts in the way in which students are served. So as they shifted from brick and mortar to virtual academy and then back to the brick and mortar, we can see that it was more students in brick and mortar in 2021. We got to 21-22, more students got served in the virtual, and now they're back in trying to look at this pandemic return of students to brick and mortar. We also have focused on migration of students, and this slide on page 18 is very huge because if we could change some of the trends that had been established over the last 3+ years, we could reverse what's happening with enrollment, students being served in the school district. A quick recap of what you see on this slide. The orange part of the bar are students that would be new in each of the 3 years that we're showing and a breakdown in the elementary, middle, and high school grades. We like this part. These are new kids into our system. The green bars are students that left the system. So they may have entirely left the district. They may have gone to homeschool, private school, or parochial. They're just not receiving services from the district. The good news is, for the last 3 years of the data that we're showing, we lost students in our net migration. This last school year, we had an increase. So there's something that's changing, because if I go back even further, most years are declining when we look at migration. We also focused on the open enrollment students that are coming into our district and where they come from. So this starts to get at the draw of the program opportunities that we have in our buildings, and we also recognize that many of these students probably have parents that are being employed by the school district, but this shows where are we getting that attraction. The greatest number of students are coming from College Community and Linn-Mar. We also want to note on the top table that our draw has decreased over the last 4 years, where we were near 700 students back in 2019-20. Here in 22-23, we're at about 500 students. With the planning areas, we can understand what's happening with enrollment over time. So on this map, we're showing where there's been increase and decrease since 1819. The green areas are a decrease. The darker the green, the greater the decrease. Orange areas are where we've had an increase. The darker color orange is the greatest increase. Predominantly, what this is starting to show is the subdivision life cycle, or where we see some of the newer developments. That's just a general rule. We also have another map where we show the concentration of students, and this is where Jonathan was kind of talking about where some of the projects have taken place, or where we have the greatest number of students in the district. And so that's why we come out to West Willow and where Truman used to be. We see this greater amount of students, and item 11 is Maple Grove. They serve this Truman area as well. So Truman's offline, but Maple Grove serves this area. So again, just trying to illustrate where the kids are, and I think Jonathan indicated here over by Johnson, we see quite a few students. Again, I recapped some of this. I'm going to move into development a little bit. Some of the things that we try to track is there a correlation to what we're seeing with census population estimates, which is the green part of the bar. And we see generally there's more people that the census data has indicated are moving into the Cedar Rapids School District. And this is the entire district boundary. It goes beyond just the city limits. And we know the city limits go beyond the school district boundary, right? So that's one of the things with census population estimates. The blue line represents the building activity from the county data that we receive. So this is when persons move into that inventory. So we've seen some building activity. We know that's going to go up when we see a lot of this multifamily come online in the next few months. The red line represents what we've seen for enrollment change. And so, generally speaking, we don't see a strong correlation to the student population and what we're seeing with building activity and enrollment. And that gets into some of the demographics, what's happening with millennials, how long they're waiting to have children, how many children are they having, what type of housing product are they moving into, lots of other questions, lots of other information we're trying to dig into when we look at our analysis. But overall, when we look at developments, we're trying to focus on how many students do we yield from any specific type of developments. This table illustrates single family, and I'll highlight this bottom row. We have this data from 2006 here through the 2022 school year, and we were averaging 16 kindergarten through 5th grade students being served for every 100 single family units. We can see over time that has decreased. So last year we were right at 12 K-5 students for every 100 single family units. In this time period, we added about 1,800 single family units. We do the same thing for multifamily, and this is categorized by apartments, duplexes, twin homes, mobile homes, and we can see it as well for the district average has decreased a little bit from where it was in 2006 through 2022. At the time of the study, we had almost 1,400 new multifamily developments, units. Another thing on this table that I didn't mention on the previous slide, we also are illustrating on this slide where the averages of units or students in each of these attendance areas is greater than 3 less than what the average is. So the green, if it's more than 3, then that district average is shaded in orange. So again, you can see there's different yield rates in these attendance areas. There's differences because we look at when units were built. On this map from the county data, what we're illustrating is when things were built. So the older it is, it's blue, and the newer it is, it's in red. You can see how that smattering is throughout your district, and you can see on the east side of 380 in the core area, that's some of the oldest inventory. We look at the median home value. Again, we can see where this is. All this data is going back to our planning areas to help us statistically understand what's happening with the enrollment that we potentially could serve. We also, again, are tracking units that are built. The dots on this map show where that's happening. The clusters really indicate where we're seeing some of those new developments and what that means for our enrollment analysis. I think this is one of those maps or visuals that helps you understand how fast things have been built. So the red portion of the bars represent the start of the decade. The orange is what was built during that decade within the school district. So again, a lot of data from the meetings we've had with the city, our tours, our understanding of developments. We've created a map that, just in my tours I had last week, it's getting updated. Where are we seeing these new developments? And particularly in the Nuvo and downtown areas, we have some other developments that we're highlighting in the next update that we have. Green areas represent where we're seeing current activity or potentially can see current activity. Yellow is going to be closer to 5 years, maybe out to 10. And then when we get to the purple, closer to 10 years. Really the impact of this, our model is trying to say there's going to be some sort of development, and we're factoring in, we're going to get some students in those areas. How can we supply the right capacity for the students that need to be served? All that data is tied back here to page 32 that the district can get a sense of where that's going to occur and what type of units and what high school boundary they're in. So what does that mean for our projections? So let me give you kind of a cap of what's happening here. So we show the elementary in red part of the bar, the middle school is the blue portion of the bar, and the green is the high school. The purple line is the aggregate. Again, this is the students that are served by the school district. There's more kids in your community choosing other options. So here we get to 2019-20, we're at about 15,500 students. COVID hit, right? Dropped down to 14,200, continued to drop the following year to under 13,900. This last year, we rebounded back to almost 14,300. What I start to look at is what happens at the lower level, the elementary, starts to set the stage for what we may see in future years as those elementary grades move into the middle school and then on into the high school. Again, we're factoring in by birth data, migration trends, development. How does this all impact us? So over the next 5 years, we're statistically indicating that we're going to move towards 6,800 students that can be served in the elementary, almost 3,200 middle schoolers, and a little over 4,600 high schoolers to give us an enrollment of over 14,500. So a little bit of growth over the next 5 years. You'll see a table on the bottom left that I also want you, when you do look at this report, we've broken the enrollments out where you can see things that are related to what the enrollment was at each level and how that relates to the current capacity. As we do some of these building changes, moving from some of the smaller buildings to the 600 size buildings, all of this kind of gets gets adjusted over time as those buildings come online or other buildings go offline. We show that same way for middle school, same thing for the high school, and then more importantly, as we get into page 41, the understanding of how does everything, remember I mentioned planning areas, this amount of information, I know it's taken board members years to sometimes understand all of this. It will take you at least 3 times to see this. And that's not anything about anyone's IQ, it's just there's so much stuff here to take in. With each of the buildings listed, we have what the capacity is for the building, the grades that are being served. Past years, we showed people in 3 ways, and the value of that is it gets into where we may see programs happening or not happening in buildings. So the middle row for each building, green font, is reside. We know when we've geocoded these students, taken their address, matched it up to the tenant's boundary, we know the number of students that are being served by our district for those grades. The blue bottom row for every building is attend. Based on the student data, we know the number of students that are attending that building. Top row is a subset of reside. Do they actually reside in that building? So let me give you a recap of Arthur. We have 293 K-5 students that resided there last year, 242 that attended. So we naturally would have said, hey, we lost 51 kids to one of the other elementary buildings. They're still in our system. But it's a little bit different. We lost about 85 students because those 85 roughly students, they went to one of the other buildings. Resided in Arthur, went someplace else, and so then we gained from 207 to 242. So again, this just helps us from the district administration perspective. How do we staff our buildings? How's it related to the programs that are in those buildings? As we move to the right, we show the projections for each of these buildings for both reside and attend, and we show what that utilization is as it's tied back to that capacity. Where we have this gray shading, that's where we're below 75% utilization. The key thing to this is why we have the elementary plan. When we're below 75% utilization, we're not optimally, efficiently using our buildings. And so as we implement each of these phases of the plan, we become a better utilized building, we become more modernized in the programs that need to be served to those students in those type of buildings. You'll see that broken out for each of the buildings as we move through both the elementary, middle school, and the high school. And one thing I want to make note on the high school, you can see that there's movement of kids. A lot of that is for Metro High students that are there. We've done a lot of analysis for the district on where those kids are coming from to go to Metro. Again, to try to get at that attend number. How do we appropriately staff each of these buildings? This was just kind of a recap for the district at the time when we finished this back in February. Some of this is changing, so this is a little bit outdated. This was from their website. But again, it just gets at the point of what we're trying to do with some of the timeline of what was occurring with the facility master plan that Jonathan went over. Really the key things I want you to take from this as I yield this back to your group is really everything is kind of been focused on data. We're not interested in saying build buildings or take buildings offline. We're interested in trying to figure out what's happening in your community and providing a metric, data, to make some of these decisions. To this point with what's happened with your elementary plan, it's worked out well with how we're able to have the right spaces for kids and start diminishing some of your costs for the operation of those buildings. And I'll leave you with, whenever we make a projection, once we've given the projection, it's almost like we're wrong. And so we have some variables that help make the understanding of how those things can change. And so page 48, take some time, look over these things on how the enrollment could be under forecasted, which would be things that happen in the orange, or under forecasted with things that happen in the green. So with that, that's all the information I had to speak to you guys tonight. I'll still be on here to listen, respond to any questions that may come up. I do appreciate the time and being able to talk with you guys.
There we go. Whoop. All right, so what are our next steps in this plan, just as far as a timeline? So with board approval, we're hopeful for a bond issue November 7th. So leading up to that, we would have a special board meeting on August 7th to go over the ballot language. There needs to be roughly just under 6,400 signatures to be able to put that on the ballot. The board would call the election in September, and really between now and then is the communication and education of what the plan is about. Also, as part of this, we have to renew our physical plant and equipment levy. We'd be looking to do that in September of 2024. That currently sunsets in June of 2025, so we want to make sure that we get that renewed ahead of that. And then, like I've said previously, the Phase 2 GO bond would be in November of 2029. And I will turn it over to Dr. Grover.
Wow. I know we've shared a lot of information with you, and we are moving towards our discussion phase here just shortly. And we heard a lot of data and information. And I guess just to get to some of the why of the matter, the overall goals for our plan is to really think about access and opportunities for our students as we think about moving to a more specific or direct feeder pattern. It would allow us to take care of some of the utilization challenges that we just talked about. And when we have more students concentrated within one of the buildings, it reduces some of the challenges that we're currently facing. As we think about right now, we have quite a bit of shared staff that have to travel from one building to the next because of the small numbers. And we want to be able to offer classes no matter which school you attend. For example, we may have some advanced placement classes that are offered at one of our high schools, not at the other high schools, just depending on availability. We also want our students to be able to compete along with our city, with our neighboring district. We saw some of the trends of what's happening there and how many students are opting out. They live here, but they're choosing other options rather than to choose our facilities. We also want to make sure that our students have access to safe and secure, conducive learning environments. In some of our classrooms, we're still faced with window units for air conditioning. I've been in a couple where we couldn't hear the teacher for the air conditioning, and our students deserve the opportunity to learn in a conducive environment. When we're talking about being competitive, we're not only being competitive for students, but we're also being competitive for staff as well. We had direct testimony from candidates who said they decided to go to another district because they have better, newer facilities. That's a reality that we're facing. We also want to make sure that we're being a good partner with our city in regards to making sure that our students are future ready. We know that it's not just about the buildings and the facilities, about what goes on inside them and the experiences that they have. With the new focus on career and tech education and more advanced classes, we'll be able to address some of the concerns we heard directly from students. They say they have the opportunity to hear about experiences, but don't really have the opportunity to have the hands-on opportunity to participate with it. In other words, by having labs and industry-level equipment, our students have the opportunity to walk away with industry certification where we come alongside our Kirkwood opportunities. While we have Kirkwood, we're still challenged by transportation. Many of our kids, they can't get to those opportunities. We also have waiting lists. And our promise to our students is to live up to our graduate profile where they are college and career ready. They should be walking away from our organization with college credits, with industry certifications, and we have the capacity to deliver that here within Cedar Rapids. We also want to make sure that our students, that they're happy and they're healthy. I think that's the ultimate goal, by allowing our schools to continue to serve as community school models. You've probably heard of our Hoover Elementary. They're the one community school that we have in our entire district. Very much about like somewhat maybe similar to your development areas, which I'm looking forward to learning more about those here in the upcoming weeks. But we've tried to think about this in the way of an area. Even though we realize that we have to consolidate some of our schools, our promise is that whatever area you're in, that you have college and career readiness, that you have a community school that you can go to, whether we're providing dental services or health care, or even food, laundry. We know that, we recognize that. So we want to make sure that within each of our areas that we have those resources available to our students as well as their families. I realize that, I guess in official capacity, I've been here for 26 days, And while this is our first opportunity to meet, I am mighty grateful that we are having this conversation because it's why now. You know, I was hoping that I would have until March to be able to think about this, but because of the legislative changes, the opportunity for us to go to the polls is in November. But as we think about this, the district has not gone to the voters for this bond in over 23 years. That says two things. That yes, the district, we've maximized our resources for a long time without having to come back and ask the voters. But also over 23 years, things change, needs, they get greater. And right now we have great facility needs for our students. And we are looking for that opportunity to invest in our schools as well as within our city. So by maximizing our funding streams, so when we started just a couple of years ago, as John may have shared some of the information with some of you, when we built, what was it, Maple Grove, our last school, we were able to build it for $20 million. 2 years later, as we prepare to open Trailside, it's at $30 million. That's a $10 million increase within that point of time. You know, our numbers now that we're coming back to the voters is lower for the first initial ask, but we wanted to take the opportunity to show our comprehensive plan so that our kids will be in facilities. When we're done with this in 2037, we'll be able to see how we have touched schools either through new schools or renovation all across our city. And we also took the opportunity to do it in 2 phases because we realized that we want to be accountable for our work. Within the 6 years, we'll be able to show our taxpayers that we're doing the work that we set out to do, and then we'll come back to you for the second ask. So as we move forward into conversations here tonight, we certainly want to answer any questions. We realize, too, that while we move forward, we will continue to evaluate. Definitely, you may have more insight while we're leaning on RSP and their research and their backgrounds, but you're right here in our city. And so you may know some areas that could be development areas, new things that you have on the horizon that we can also consider as we prepare to finalize this plan so that we can make a decision on, the Board of Education can make a decision on whether or not we would take it to the full community. So at this time, President Tominski, I'll turn it back over to you, open up for discussion.
Thank you. First, thank you to John, Dr. Grover, and Rob for the presentation. This school board got together last Monday, so about a week and a half ago for a similar update. A lot of the questions that we had were around density and the mapping, so I appreciate just inviting Rob to be able to share that with the entire community. At this time, I'd love to just open it up to discussion to our mayor and council.
Council? Thoughts, questions? Councilmember Van Orden?
Yeah, I mean, I can go at any point in time. So I'll be honest, there are a few people in this room who have spent more time on this than me. But I've always been very clear, volunteering my time at the facility master plan meetings, that I don't represent the city. I'm one of 9, and I've said that every single time. And I've also, unfortunately, one, I felt like I had to go because the first time that the elementary facility master plans came up, what happened is that the city staff were invited, but the times are inconvenient times, they run over, and so what happens is people can't make it all the time, and then decisions were made that weren't incongruent with what the city was developing or what we were planning, but they said, well, yeah, but we invited your staff, they just didn't care enough to come, or they just didn't come. So I made sure that I never missed a meeting, and if you looked at my attendance records, it's probably in the 90 percentile. That being said, I have some pretty strong feelings about all of this and how it's gone. I know that I've done my best to try and communicate some of the things that have held us back or that have brought concern to me to the city. But I'll be honest, I don't see how this passes in November. I just don't think you're ready yet. There's a lot of things that are hanging this up that are really concerning to me. And I will tell you that as a proud product of this school district and a continued investor personally into this school district, I would not have given more than 100 hours of my time if I didn't believe in the need to have this be successful. But here's just a few things. So we talked about communication. That was said quite frequently. There's been almost none. I'm not the city. So when we talk about, multiple people, and I'm going to try and follow some of the same rules that we have at city council and not pull any one person under and just be professionally respectful as much as I can. But there have been some people who have been overly in power, who have not correctly represented the information. And if I had not been at those meetings, we would have really gotten sidetracked. So I have done my best to be at them every single time so that we can fully represent the incredible amount of investment that's happening throughout the city, that people from the district, not the board members, not the directors, not even necessarily the superintendent at the time, and our incoming with Dr. Grover knew about. But there were things like that, things like Historic Preservation Committee that were never even mentioned. Matter of fact, when I brought it up at the earlier part, this was at Jefferson High School, it said, yeah, why are we calling them historic buildings? They're just old buildings. They're just falling apart. We just need to tear them down. Now, I appreciate that the rhetoric right now says that we're not going to touch them, but that doesn't include Harrison, and I know that's a huge sticking point for this council, especially considering the massive investment in the Time Check neighborhood that we've been putting in. We specifically, as a committee, chose that because of the incredible investments that we put in that neighborhood. I will also say that the volunteers that have been a part of this committee, it is very hard to get to these times. It's late in the evening. I know everybody has done their best. There have obviously been a lot of sloughing off that has happened over the years, since it's been several years. But the people there, while we may have not had diversity in numbers or diversity in race or sexual orientation or a lot of other things that are really important in building a great community, we really did try to actively pursue all of those subject matters every time we were making a decision. And I've also been reminded to know my role that the committee has served when decisions that were not made by the committee were represented as being made or supported by the committee. And I just want to be really clear that some of these have not been. The 2022 plan was great. We should have stuck right there. Some of the things, for example, like the aquatic center, I know that I was one of the people who proposed it because I saw the need and a creative solution to invest in something that we don't have, like a diving tower, which is why we're losing people. And now you've just seen that college community is also looking at these things. Why? Because if they would have looked at our data that we did not wait for the school district to pursue as a partner, because we want that too, but it hasn't been there, we saw that everything that we were advocating for on those committees was proven with that data. Proven that we need these shared facilities. We want to be a partner. I've been literally dragging the conversation of the city to the table every single time I've been at that committee meeting, but every time I followed up with city staff and said, has somebody contacted you? They've said no. That's really disheartening. So some of this information, you look at, now again, I've lived in the same neighborhood for over 30 years. So I'm very passionate about the district that I represent. I'm the only one on council who lives in that district. I also share it with college community. But if you look at the median income alone, at where you're looking at combining into a 1,200 person school, it's some of the lowest median income in the school. And you're asking those people to go all the way across town to, quite honestly, the richer neighborhood, when there is not any more funding for busing. So I'm really concerned about that. It doesn't really matter to me. You're going to keep Grant Elementary, fine. But for the same reason that Grant Elementary was important is the same reason that Wilson is important, to keep that so it's not a 1,200 person school, which, by the way, the principal of Taft said, please don't make a 1,200 person middle school. And yet it's pursuing that in the 2023 version. I have a long list. I'm not going to take up all the space in the room, but I just want to say that I really hope we can actually become a partner, because I think the things that we actually agree on are very plentiful, but there are some real sticking points here that are not thought out and not prepared for November.
I could just open it up for discussion. So, I mean, certainly from council, I would certainly invite anybody on the school board to comment.
Well, can I join in here?
Yes.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. As many of you know, I'm an architect and designed lots of schools at Linn-Mar and Summit College Community and across eastern Iowa. And then I've watched, since I'm not practicing anymore, I've watched what's happening in growing communities around the state of Iowa. And the communities that are growing have updated facilities. And I see all the time on the Skogman MLS, I don't do residential, people saying, I want to move to Cedar Rapids, but I want to be in this district. They pick a district. And I think what's happening is I've watched the changes. I have to, in my district, all three so far of the new elementary buildings are in my district here on the northwest, southwest side, except for Arthur. And my dad taught at Arthur. And so, you know, I'm seeing the changes already in people looking at that area. The chart showed it. That's the area that's growing. And what happens is we need to make sure they don't grow in Hiawatha necessarily. You know what I'm saying? We want as many people to live in Cedar Rapids. And the world is changing. It's with the pandemic, we saw the changes in the dips. Many big districts in the country are dropping in enrollment. We're holding in there and coming back. And I think for us to maintain and grow as a city, we have to have updated facilities. So I'm proud of the effort that the district is putting forward to do that. And some of these data points are really interesting because they match where the city's growing. And so it makes sense, put the schools where the students are so they can walk and bike. That's why we're building millions of dollars worth of trails, an easy way to get there safely to school. So I think you're heading in the right direction, and having been at the ribbon cuttings for the first new elementaries, I think it's made a difference. And the neighborhood is positive. The people living around there love them. And so I own historic buildings, and I've done a lot of school districts where we saved historic buildings and added additions on just because of cost in these small cities. But I think that what's I think's happening is we are fighting through our economic development group to grow the city. We're short of workers. It's changing how people are living. You saw that in the multifamily. You know, it's getting expensive to own a house. And so we're going to see a lot of changes in the demographics as to where people live and how they live. So I think that we have to, and I'm heavily involved in Iowa State University, and a lot of you are Iowa people as well, and unfortunately, an 18-year-old makes a decision on where to go to college based on how nice their facilities are. That's a shame. They don't look at necessarily the education. They want to go to new stuff. And I think that's the same way in some of these schools at the elementary level. So my questions come up. I think your statistics are, in the first part, are better than what I anticipated. I anticipated seeing a drop. But in being in the real estate business, you're placing schools where the growth is. And that's a logical way to do it. And I don't know, John didn't talk about it, but my assumption is when you build a new building, it's cheaper to run than an old building. And it saves money. So we're going to save money so we can maybe put that into teachers or other types of programs. That was not highlighted, that I think is an important factor. The unfortunate part, and I think Ashley mentioned, most people aren't going to look at this data. I mean, the public. So there has to be, I think, a solid way for the district to present this to the public as to what are those key benefits to having buildings. And it's going to get down in certain areas to saving McKinley, or are we historically preserving Harrison, or are we doing other things? And all of a sudden, okay, but what does that have to do with education? We want to make sure that our educational facilities match up with cities all over the state of Iowa and the Midwest so we can grab people. So how do we compare those things? How do we get to the public with that? And I guess we're doing things in the city. I'm going to use the example of Paving for Progress. When that first rolled out, there were people at these hearings that just hated it. You're going to put a sidewalk in my neighborhood. You're going to do all of that. Well, after they got through and saw what was happening, it passed by 70% to renew it. They saw it. They can now see it in some of these buildings, but a lot of the people live in areas where they don't have these new buildings. And so I don't know how you prove that. Are people going to look at 40-some pages or 50-some pages of data? I doubt it. And so you've got to find a way to do that. I personally understand some of the other concerns, but I also want Cedar Rapids to be number one, whether that's in the job opportunities, in the best streets in the city. We're going to have the best ADA. I would like to have Cedar Rapids have the best schools in the state of Iowa. And so how we get there is a tough thing because it is impacting closing buildings. And neighborhoods are changing. And we need to have the same quality of facility in every neighborhood, not just in the new areas with new schools, because that's where the growth is. We need to have the same quality in our older core neighborhoods so that no matter where you live in Cedar Rapids, you're equal. And that's a hard thing to do. I think this plan does that to a certain extent. You know, I've not been followed on the committees, but I can understand the concerns, and we haven't met together, I mean, probably as much as we should, but there's been lots of transition going among the board, among staff, and among the council. And I think that what we need to do is this kind of session, which is public, so you can't, there's certain things that happen, that you have to say or not say in a meeting, but I want to just, what was interesting to me, and I made a series of notes as I went on through, what your plan does is matching what's happening in the city and the areas that are growing and the areas that are, so it doesn't do any good to keep old buildings necessarily. I like preserving buildings, but keeping an old building in an area where there's no growth. And then the facilities are outdated. So if I lived in a nice older neighborhood, and we have some beautiful neighborhoods that are just fabulous, that's where our affordable housing is, and they should have the same quality of facility and the same course quality of education. So how do we get there from point A to point B? You're having to rush forward because of the change in the state law. That's unfortunate. And because it's going to make things a lot more difficult for everybody, the school board, city council, whatever. But we do have to work together to get this done, because what you do impacts what we do, I think, personally. And so I want to make sure that whether we agree with every single item on the chart, and there's a couple that I have questions on, which I didn't see in there, the Wilson thing, I didn't quite understand that part, it didn't get hit in there as to whether that stayed or not. But we just need to look what's good for our students, because what we have to do, if we're going to recruit workers, they have to, if they're going to move to Cedar Rapids, Iowa, rather than Ankeny or Waukee or Ames or schools that are building $90 million high schools and $100 million, I mean, some of the numbers I'm seeing are unbelievable compared to 30 million or 40 million or whatever it is. Which city do they want to take a job in? So we've got to have better schools, no question, and for the long term, because we do not want to be a community that's declining. We want to have a community that's getting better. So I support your direction. The new elementaries, I can't keep up with all the new tree names or anything. I remember presidents, but I don't remember trees. And so, I think that as the world changes, so that's my thoughts. And again, is it a perfect plan right now? I'm sure each of us have a different opinion as to what is perfect and what isn't. But I think your graphics show greatly that the district is hanging in there. We're going to grow. And how we keep growing is we've got to get people moving inside our city. And the way to do that is to have good, shiny schools, because a parent comes in, I do not like it. It's when I see an agent, a real estate agent saying, I'm looking for this house, but it has to be in this district. And it's either Linn-Mar or College Community that pops up. I don't see somebody putting Cedar Rapids in there. We can't have that. We have to have Cedar Rapids standing with all those surrounding districts. Personal opinion.
Absolutely. Thank you for the comment.
I have a question, just to clarify. You touched on this. If I've read the materials accurately, Wilson and Roosevelt will go away.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so there's going to be one middle school on the west side?
Yes, correct.
And then where will the Wilson and Roosevelt students go?
Yep, so with this, we talked about the feeder system alignment. So in each area of our city, in the Washington area, we would have 2 middle schools. We'd have the 6th grade academy for McKinley and a 7-8 building at Franklin. So those 2 buildings would feed to Washington. The new building on the north side of our district would feed to Kennedy, and then the new building at the Taft site would feed to Jefferson. So the majority of those students in the Roosevelt and Wilson neighborhoods would feed to Taft.
Okay. And you're not closing McKinley, but you're reducing it to 6th grade. So your 7th and 8th grade McKinley students will be bused. Do you have money to bus them? Can you ensure that they will be bused to Franklin?
Yep, so we would follow the state rules that we have to with our radiuses and walkability pass to get to
Because we
Franklin.
keep hearing about funding issues with busing. So, okay, so right there, I just want to express, I appreciate the data, and I don't dispute that we have exciting growth, college community direction, as well as certainly where you're looking to build this shiny new school in the least diverse neighborhood with probably the highest socioeconomic opportunities, okay? This school board, I know, was very concerned about equity, specifically as this council debated school resource officers. We had a lot of conversations about equity. This is the same school, if this is the plan, that we're gonna expect our, marginalized communities, maybe with the most challenges, we're going to expect them to get on a bus and go to Franklin. So that's the first sort of disconnect I have, because I don't like that idea. Just to be, that concerns me. The other section that really concerns me is the closure of, you're basically closing all the middle schools on the west side. Here's how I know we won't have growth in infill, and if you followed any of the council, you know that we are incredibly focused on infill and have the results to show it. I mean, I think we'll have 1,000 new living units in our downtown core by the fall, and that's just the beginning. So this council is aware of the health of our city core. My concern about the schools, from a very basic standpoint, are development drivers. I mean, we know people move to neighborhoods, you said it yourself, people move here because of public safety, they move to neighborhoods because of public safety and because of schools. So one way I know for sure that they're not going to move to those neighborhoods, and frankly, even if you don't have a kid in those schools, you might care, because I believe your property is going to be worth less without schools in those neighborhoods. So my concern is what I've heard at least one of your board members talk about, is the hollowing out of our city. And I have real concerns about that with the plan as I read it right now. And I think it's really important to say that, new schools, I grew up in Bettendorf, for heaven's sakes, with Director Newman. We grew up in shiny new schools, and basically it was a suburb. So I appreciate that, and I know the value that people place on that. I also raised my kids on purpose in the, Arthur Erskine McKinley Wash district, because I really appreciated the strength of and the quality of the education and the experience they had there. I'm not opposed at all to new schools where the growth is. I do get concerned when we get middle schools to 1,200 kids, because I know in middle school it's a tricky time of development for a young person, and sometimes I think those large numbers can get in the way of that, and kids don't have all the opportunities they can have sometimes in a smaller, being captain of teams, et cetera, those types of things. I think it's an and. I think I absolutely want to support the shiny new school in the fancy district where all the growth is. And I want to make sure we are not giving up, which is frankly, if I'm being frankly, giving up on our city schools. And by not investing in the west side, I'm afraid that that's going to happen. And I really fear it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you say you don't have a lot of kids there, well, I know one way you're not going to or ever have a lot of kids there, and that's to close those schools and bus those kids.
Director Newman.
Do you want to go?
I don't care, Jen, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So first of all, thank you to everybody, and Councilman Olson, I agree with a lot of your sentiments on that, and we do have to match what's happening in our community. And Councilperson Van Orney, I hear your grievances, and I understand where you're coming from. And Mayor, I have a lot of these same concerns. We have to think creatively here. We have to think about what's realistic for our district to afford in order to provide a quality education. And one of the reasons we're here today is because this is a growing community, and we are all very committed. I think I heard a statistic that we're actually growing faster than Des Moines, and I'm competitive, so I love that, right? But how are we?
The city of Des Moines.
City of Des Moines. City of Des Moines. I might have heard that from you.
You probably did, more than once.
More than once.
No,
We're not saying West.
I said Des Moines.
So that being said, whether it's this plan or an evolution of this plan, whether it's this year or it's next year, action needs to be taken, but more importantly, creative thought needs to go into how we do this. If we are concerned about hollowing out the core, and I have that same concern, then how do we do this in a way that we can keep that presence and do that, and I'm talking specifically at the middle school level. How do we do that in the current financial situation that we have? I mean, we are already asking voters for a lot of money for this. We can't just say, can you add on another 50 million?
And that's a fair question. In order to, and
my experience is with initiatives, pass the pool initiative. If I ran it today, I'd pass another one. It's 94 degrees out there. You know, the flood initiative, I was on the committee in 2010. How you do it is you involve the community in a way. I'm going to take this example of McKinley, okay? Trying to rebuild the core. If we approach the community in terms of like, what would a campus look like there? What if the city went in through reinvestment and helped stabilize those blocks right around it, cleaned it up, really built a decent, I'm glad to see you're investing in the facilities, you know, because that's why you lose market share to a degree. If we went to them with a plan, that is how the city can partner. I'm glad our Park and Rec director is here because the city and the school district have had a long history of cooperating on land assembly, on partnerships. I was a commissioner when we did Viola Gibson. We did the time check project with Northwest Rec. You know, there's all kinds of opportunity to engage more people, more users, more voters, more people that actually vote. But, and sorry, you mind if I jump ahead, Ann?
Go ahead.
Is it all right?
Not the first time.
This is a conversation we should have been having, okay? And there's no blame, not throwing anyone under the bus. Our relationship has been somewhat, I'm not going to call it rocky, but we're not kissing cousins, you know? And there's a lot of different reasons for that, but in the end of the day, the city succeeds if the school district succeeds. We sink or swim together. The same challenges you have in these inner city schools are the same challenges I have in these inner city neighborhoods. I have Johnson, I have McKinley, okay? At the same time, ironically, I've got all this growth. That's crazy. We're talking about numbers, thousands of units added here soon. And Bob and I from RSP, we had a lot of discussions, okay? Because the data says one thing. But I think there's an elephant in the room that isn't being addressed. And you have to address that in order to build these bonds of trust with the community. One's classroom discipline, the other one's white flight. And those issues are at the root of not just this district, but other districts all over. When people come to town, you know, we'll build, the reality is that people are coming to cities. City's going to grow no matter what we do, no matter who's sitting here. The city's going to grow. But then they ask themselves that question about the district. Do we go to the district or do we go somewhere else? So how do you capture them? And we all have friends who have been involved in the district. My kid was in school. And those are issues that are front and center to a lot of people who pull their kids from the district or talk. And so I think we really have to get to the root of what is going on there. Initiatives evolve. This isn't dead, but you want to be able to do it right because of the amount of money that you're asking, which is significant, which has got people scratching their heads. But at the same time, if you don't do anything, it's going to continue to erode. So you're faced with that challenge. Enrollment decreases, student migration, subdivision life cycles. Those are all things we need to talk about. And initiatives, the day you announce it, that's the day you have the most support. But as you get closer to, and people will disagree, but my experience is, the day you announce it, if you've got no opposition, the closer you get to that election day, you hope to have more than one vote to get over what you need. If opposition builds, then they're going to pick away at that. And so timing is critical, but there's never a good time. you have to have this, this really has to be, the constituencies need to be built, and everybody needs to be in lockstep in order to make it happen. And it's my belief that people in this community, if you have a good idea, if your project has, you have done your due diligence, if it's got a strong framework and foundation, you've done the outreach that needs to happen, the community will support it, and they will support their school district. But you only get a shot, especially with the legislature the way it is today. And so I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I'm telling you we need to work better together. And if your board is not in lockstep with what you're trying to do, that doesn't give us in the community a lot of trust. And so I would encourage you to have those conversations and figure out what's going on there. But we're here to help you. We want to see it succeed.
And I would want to get right to you. I think it's also important. We have a lot of questions and thoughts here, and we are here to help provide solutions. You know, when you talk about, Director Newman, great, what do we do with the money that we have? This is where the city, through the lens through which we view things, we know all the land. I have our development team looking to see if there's any available land for a project like this. So, leaning on us, people who do this every day to get creative, to be creative, to find, ways that would answer some of those questions. So we are here to extend that too, and hope that happens, because I think we can get some good ideas. Councilmember Poe.
Thank you, Mayor. And Council, I certainly appreciate your thoughtfulness in having this conversation with our school board, and thank you so much for your invitation. We appreciate it. A couple of things, and I'm going to just add some historic background to some of you that may not know. I was born on the west side of Cedar Rapids. I went to Harrison, I went to Roosevelt, and then I went across the river to Kennedy. And at the time, I'm dating myself, at the time, Edgewood Bridge, imagine that, was not built. I was 16, however, and I had a car. So I was able to go downtown all the way around and out to Kennedy. I was one of the few lucky ones because I wanted to be engaged in after-school activities. I was on the swim team. I had to be at the I had to be at the pool early. I wanted to stay after for cheerleading. I was involved in a lot of after-school activities. But I'm telling you what a burden that would have been for my parents if I wanted to be involved and tried to get from Ellis Boulevard over to Kennedy. Please be thoughtful. I mean, yes, this is wonderful. I mean, you do have some very elements that I could really get behind and support. But I can't support, and I would struggle with, just as the mayor has said, removing our schools, our middle schools on the west side. And maybe some of you don't realize, as a West Sider, there was always kind of this divide between the east side and the west side. The river divided us. And it was unfortunate. I think we've grown past some of that, but in some cases it still exists. And by removing a middle school or two middle schools out of the west side and busing these children who want to be engaged in activities, both in the morning and in the afternoon, and the undue burden that puts on parents, I really want you to please think through that. Because on one hand, yes, we want our children to have a wonderful education. We want to encourage them and give them the very best start we possibly can to go on to college and to the trades, if that's what they choose. However, a part of that education is engagement. It's engagement in those activities, whether it's show choir, whether it's athletics, whether it's an art class, whatever that extracurricular activity is. I'm really afraid, as this plan sits now, number one, you're eliminating a whole section of our community which is the west side, in a large sense, by having to bus people that far. That's really worrisome to me as a West Sider, former West Sider. The other thing I'd really like you to be thoughtful of is in 2008, I know, Dr. Glover, you were not here, but in 2008, our community suffered a devastating flood. At the time, it was the 6th worst natural disaster, and Katrina had already happened. The time check area and the west side where I grew up no longer exists. At the time that the city council decided that they were going to work with the school board and put the Northwest Rec Center in at Harrison, that was a really wonderful partnership. We don't have enough room at that rec center because it's so busy. But I'm telling you, it's a challenge, as Director Taylor would tell you, to get people over there. It's the one rec center we have. It's a challenge, as in Hashem, because it's so used. But we cannot continue to take away from this area of our community that we're fighting so hard as a council to restore. We're fighting like crazy to bring people back into that corner of our community. And if you drive down there, it's just right down the street. If you drive down here, you'll see that we're continuing to try and build housing around this area. And Harrison School, yeah, I know, bright and shiny and new's wonderful. Yeah, and it serves teachers. And yeah, in some cases it serves kids, but having gone to Harrison, you know what? It was beautiful. It was perfect. I loved it. I loved the old auditorium. I liked the hill going out for recess. I have to say, please, as we're trying to hold our community together, one of our fastest growing community sections of our community is New Bohemia. I think he called it Nubo, but it's New Bohemia in Czech Village. And we're going to, as Mayor O'Donnell, so we've got almost 1,000 units that are come online. Now, these are probably units that aren't going to have a lot of kids in them. So as you're looking at those statistics, yeah, that's a big growth area, but will it really be taking care of, families there? Probably not as much as other areas that we're continuing to work hard to develop. And in closing, I'm just going to say this. I've had the opportunity to be the chair person for the Council Development Committee. We have developments come before us all the time. And one of the things we've always talked about are hub communities. And Dr. Glover, I think I kind of mentioned that a little bit to you. Hub communities are communities that have a church, they have a grocery store, they probably have a healthcare clinic, they have a gas station, they may have other services like a barber shop or a salon of some sort, but they always have a school. They always have a school. Schools are critical to the core of our community. And we have to be so intentional and so thoughtful when we're talking about taking them out or removing them or busing kids. Yeah, bright and shiny and new is wonderful, and we see it all around us with these other school districts. But sometimes it's okay. It's okay to shift and move a little bit. Maybe it would be okay just to keep this beautiful, old, historic Harrison and add an addition or renovate to some way or another and keep a little bit of what's us, especially in that time check area that's lost so much. Thank you.
Thanks for the comments.
Can
Any
I just
additional
add
comments?
something real quick onto that?
Director Newisher.
As you talked about the elephant in the room, and there's probably more elephants than we talked about. I mean, we didn't talk about sort of the west side piece of that as an elephant as well, but it made me think of the phrase, how do you eat an elephant, right? It's one bite at a time. And so we're handing out forks tonight, really, because we have to figure out how to do this together in order to serve our community. So I really just believe that we're going to need creative thought behind how we finalize how we move forward with new schools and existing schools within our community. And it's going to take compromise, and we're all going to eat some bites we don't want to eat too. But this is a big first step today, I think. Like, just having this conversation, just being in this room together and talking about it and putting our priorities out there for each other, it's really important. And I really appreciate hearing it.
Yeah.
that need to happen in order to move a community forward.
100%.
Am I up?
Yeah.
All right, thank you. I appreciate it and appreciate the invitation to be here and hear about the plan a little bit more and ask some questions. I know we're focused on facilities. I mean, there's a lot of work that you all in the district have done with programs too in the last few years that I think have been really special. You've got Iowa Big, you've got your magnet academies. I mean, I don't want to miss that, in all of this too. I mean, the buildings and the facilities are important, but I just want to commend you all and your team for those kind of programmatic things that I think really set Cedar Rapids apart from other districts too. So I just encourage you to keep going with that, with the innovation on the programming side too. I mean, you have 8th graders taking high school classes, and it's just a lot of opportunity, programmatically too. So my hat's off to you all on that.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. So I guess I have a couple of questions. Not sure exactly where to start. When we're talking about the renovations to some of the buildings, like middle schools in particular, I mean, is that, I don't know how much of the plan is kind of like fleshed out. Or is that new construction at those buildings adding on? Is it renovating? I mean, is it a mix? Kind of how does that break down?
Yeah, so it's a mix. So for example, at Franklin, there's some renovations so that the learning environments are very similar to what the learning environments of a new building is. And it includes a new gymnasium there because the competition gym that we have there now doesn't meet standards for the National Federation of High School Standards. So it's a mix at all of the buildings of upgrades, renovations, and then some additions as well.
Okay, and then the high school CTE, I think you referred to it as like career and technical, is that right?
Yep, career
Okay.
tech ed, yep.
And is that, and that's at each of the 3 high schools? And is that like new construction at each of the new, is that kind of the thought there, is that's new construction at each of the high schools to add space to?
Yeah, so actually currently we have a task force in place to kind of define what does our city need, what does our employers here in town need for workforce development. So defining what those program looks like, is that healthcare, is that building trades, is that education, on down the line. So defining what is our workforce here in town wanting would then really define the type of programs we'd have, which would then drive us to, is that renovations, additions, or a combination thereof based on the spaces that we would need.
Okay, and probably equipment too, would be, yeah, I mean,
Correct.
you're gonna, okay,
Yep.
that makes sense. I mean, I think it just kind of, to talk a little bit, maybe have a couple other questions. As you look at kind of the breakout of the different projects in phase 1 and 2, I mean, obviously the big ticket item is a new school, right? I mean, that's going to be, looking at this list and thinking about it, I think there's probably some significant investment in other places too. I think it would be helpful kind of to, as we talk about some of the concerns that have been raised, I don't know how far down the line you are, but to kind of, think about how those, I forget what the number is, 220 million, right? Like how does that kind of break out amongst the different, projects? Because, we talked a lot, I appreciate the conversation about the demographics and the stats, and I asked the city manager sitting here if he would ask for the full report. I think it'd be kind of interesting, well, I shouldn't say interesting. Maybe it'd be interesting to look through 70 pages of the numbers. But it'd be informative at the very least. I think, Jen, we had a conversation last week, and I think I appreciated that about, where you build new and a new school and that kind of thing. And I think we all kind of share the concern about, the core of the community and the city council. Ultimately, when you look at kind of where we have focused a lot of our time and energy and resources as far as incenting development, it really has been in neighborhoods around the core of the community. I don't think it has to be an or, right? I think there's a limit, right? There's a budget, and so, right? So I understand that there's a budget. And I just think as we kind of go through and we go through the process of thinking about this together, we have to find a way that kind of, balances the need for new facilities where they don't exist, because we do have a lot of new families in places where they weren't 23 years ago, right? I mean, we just do. With the need to continue to invest significant resources in making sure that our schools that are in the core of the community, those kids are going to have the same level of facilities that, they are in the rest of the community. So I don't have like a numbers and all that kind of stuff, but, to the point you keep making about, how do we be creative about it? My sense is, the solution somewhere lies, and it maybe already is. This is why I'm asking kind of how it breaks out amongst the different projects, in making sure that even if we're not building a new middle school, on the site of McKinley or in the vicinity or Franklin or whatever, that we're investing significant resources in making sure the facilities, are of the same caliber as if a new school or, a brand new facility was going to get built there. So, just some kind of thought. I really think when the majority of my kind of questions kind of revolve around how do we balance building where growth is, because you have to do that, with what the city's effort has been to, and I think ultimately I think the community understands the importance of keep reinvesting in our core neighborhoods. I guess a couple other kind of more technical questions. When you look at building a new facility, like how much, and this kind of goes to the demographics of the numbers, how much of that is like based on who lives there now versus like what, I mean, obviously you're not building a facility for 5 years, it's for 40 or 50, I don't know what you say the life cycle is. I mean, how much of that is based on what you think the future growth is going to be versus like what is needed right now?
I think you take both into consideration there a little bit, and yeah, you build some capacity there for the future growth, but also we don't want to get in a spot where we are now, where we have our utilization of our buildings, and some of them is under 70%. So we want to have extra capacity, but every square foot you build is extra money, right? So you want to be smart with that you don't build too much capacity.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, and obviously there are trends, but they can turn, right? I mean, development can turn, and so I guess the answer is not a ton of it is based on, maybe projected capacity. I mean, really, you need the space now is what you're saying. And I guess the last kind of question, and, it kind of goes hand in hand, I think, is school boundary lines, right? I mean, obviously that's going to get scrambled in all this. What's kind of the timeline for the district to kind of think about that as new schools get built and that kind of thing? I mean, what is, maybe there isn't one immediately. I don't know. I'm just kind of curious I'm not asking for like a map with the lines. I'm just curious, right? I mean,
Right.
I'm just wondering like what you kind of see, like as far as growth goes and new facilities goes, at what point in the future does that become something that needs to be done?
Yep, and there's probably several stages to this. Just as you were saying, as new buildings come online, like naturally there's going to be boundaries that change. When buildings close, there's boundaries that change. So the first phase of our plan would be complete in 2029, 2030 is what we'd be looking at, and that would probably be the first major shift of any boundaries would be at that time. So that's years down the road from now.
Okay.
I just want to add on to that concept of this idea that like this is not happening overnight. So just want to keep that in mind. And so in part of the phase-in plan, and just as we've been guided through this process by some of the experts, and really what the district has done in the past, is kind of evaluating as you go. So as we're thinking about the middle school concepts and the core, and just like what you're anticipating and sharing here tonight about your development, what you're anticipating in the number, of homes and how many kids are going to be there, and really and truly, if those families are going to attend our schools, that's another, part of it, that we still have the opportunity to rethink this at any particular time as we go. So especially with the middle school concept, it's going to be about 6 years before that domino actually happened. And so there may be indicators. And again, we want to know if you have land available. And I will say this, that when we rolled out the plan too, that was the hardest part for me of this plan, that I had to sit here as the superintendent of schools and acknowledge the fact that there was going to be no new school for our most underserved area, right? So that was a challenge for me as well. But when so I don't have to say this to you all because you deal with it all the time, and that is that when we are running a large operation, things are complex. You have competing priorities. You also have budget. You have different interest groups. You have all of that. And so we're trying to look for the way that's going to get us to the greater good, right? And that's going to serve us. So the one thing I've heard here tonight is that, schools are critical. They are critical. And we're not doing the facilities in isolation of other work that I know that has to occur, that the board knows that has to occur here in the school district, hence the reason I'm here. We also have a strategic plan that's also running alongside this that will also address other areas. We're not here to talk about that tonight, but I look forward to sharing that with you all in the future as well. So just wanted us to understand that this doesn't have to be our last conversation. I hope that it's not. And although the process may have been clunky, I've tried to take every step I can going forward to try to build relationships. I'm new here, right? But this is our opportunity to try to think about a path forward. And even if we had rolled out the other plan that we started with, there was people already standing saying they weren't going to vote for that one either. Sure. So there is no perfect plan here. But we have to decide together. And so whether or not it passes, I also go as far as to say that it just won't be on the back of the school district. It'll be on the backs of all of us coming together to say that this is a need in our city while we have things to figure out. And I appreciate what you're saying about the core. I hope that there are some creative ideas, right? We're landlocked. That's what we can see to the fact that we are. But do we want a skyscraper school? I don't know. Let's talk about it. Do we want a school where they have to be bused at extracurricular activities? So if we built a school, they wouldn't have the athletic facilities that you explained. So we are negotiating between all of these all this type of information all the time to try to get to where we are. And you speak about equity, and that is what we want to provide for our students. Equity is simple as this, giving students what they need. So if they need transportation, we're going to provide them the transportation in accordance to how we have supported them. We will continue to do that, but the price of transportation, we have to weigh that to running a building that's at 60% capacity and the cost of that. So again, you're negotiating all of that. So making sure that our students access an opportunity, that's what I talked about. I believe every kid should have access. They should be in at least one extracurricular activity at all times. I believe in that. That's another issue. We haven't talked about that yet, Director Taylor, in regards, and that's on the radar as well. I believe every student should have the opportunity for college and career access, no matter which school they attend. And you just described that you had to drive all the way to Kennedy, and right now that's what we have. Our kids are fighting trying to get to Kennedy and moving out of their neighborhoods. We need more students to attend in the Washington area, right? And so we've thought about all of that, and I appreciate the feedback. Really looking forward to more discussions going forward. And if you do have solutions that can help us with it, but I just want to let you know, because we are in phases of this, and we won't solve it all, but it's what is the next best step that we can take to move us forward.
And just one last thought here. I don't know, this is your meeting.
Oh, no.
You wouldn't know it by all my interruptions.
Absolutely. You are invited guest that's allowed to speak.
Cooks in the kitchen here. But, one of the things I so appreciate Dr. Grover's willingness to be open to changing times and keeping an eye on how our city is growing. I'm hoping I'm hearing flexibility in the middle schools on the west side. I'm hoping I can read between the lines there. My only caution on that is we know what happens when you have plans to build a school. We have speculators immediately building developments around it. And if there's a prospect that these schools are going to close,
Yeah.
today,
Yeah.
they may as well be closed in terms of development. So I just caution there, you know, once we say we're going to do that, the effects will be immediate.
Yep.
And we're dealing with the information we have today.
Yeah.
And so, you know, and we put out our challenges there in regards to, we have underutilization. We can't afford to keep all of the schools open. And as far as land and capacity, we've struggled to figure that out. So we're being very transparent with that. So if there are ideas or solutions that can come forward, I think, you know, this is the opportunity for us. But this is the plan as we know it today with the information that we have. But I think, you know, and I appreciate, you know, you sharing it with us, because that's pretty much something that's out of our control. And how do you manage that and message that, knowing that, you know, 6 years from now, maybe, hey, who knows how many people we might have here and what would have changed. But any information that we have now that you have access to, and again, this is not our last conversation, I think it could help guide the process. But the plan as presented, that is what we know as we see it to be at this particular time.
I was just going to add, I'm going to go back to Jen, the creativity piece. You had an issue with transportation with students, and we made the city buses free for students. And so, and that was the city manager and staff, that was a slam dunk. In terms of housing, you know, a lot of the affordable housing that we do is based on a formula. And that formula, after the flood, a lot of that was single, you know, 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom units. If we have an idea, speaking strategically, if we want to all invest in that area, then we incentivize 3- and 4-bedroom development in that area to enhance those demographics in that neighborhood. So, you know, there's a lot of opportunity, and I appreciate your passion on this. It'll pass in due time.
I just want, and I know that I want to hear from the other directors, because there's several that we haven't had a chance to hear from, but I will just be really quick. The committee really did talk about distributing new and expanded renovation throughout the city so that it wasn't concentrated in any one area. There were incredibly hard choices throughout. Basically, we came to a full compromise in the 2022 plan because it wasn't any one place. So at that point in time, because it was truly a compromise, we didn't feel like any side was winning over another. There were some that were getting bright new and shiny, some that were getting a brand new renovated building, but it was going to attempt to accomplish that throughout. We all know that the city feeder system is something that we all want. That's part of what the plan spoke to too, and I really appreciate the fact that that comes with the very emotional ties with where do you go to high school. So we know that. We know that that's going to happen. We'll work through that. I don't think that's something that's going to prevent this from being successful. But I just want to say, when we're talking about the West Side, and it's not just a West Side conversation, that's not why this is happening, but we did talk about how this is supposed to change and adapt with that. If you look at the data that you provided tonight, the data is actually showing the retention in some of the areas that you, 6 years later, still continue to want to close. That's including Van Buren, that's including Taylor, that's including Roosevelt. So, you know, if you look at the map, you're basically saying a huge chunk of your area is scooting up a couple of miles. And they're going to keep paying into the system, but they're not going to have any accessible, walkable schools. That's my biggest concern. But I want to defer back to at least the other three directors we haven't had a chance to hear from.
John, I think the slide that's up, were you going to speak to that, or was that?
Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I can speak to this a little bit. So this is as we look into the future, 2037, when our proposed plan would be 100% complete. And you can see there, this lists all the schools that we currently have in our inventory and what happens with them, whether there's a new building built there, if it's renovated, or if it's a repurposed building. So that's really what this is trying to show, is what will our city look like from a school perspective in 2037.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for us sitting down and meeting to discuss how we move forward as the Cedar Rapids community. So I appreciate that. And listening to Scott and looking at where our growth is at. And I know I'm a West Sider. My kids went to the West Side. So we take a step back and look and say, you know, nothing has been finalized, but it's good to hear the voices saying if the middle schools would leave on the west side, transportation is always been a concern to get kids back and forth. And some of our kids don't have that opportunity to participate in extracurricular activities. I can appreciate Del Todd, his comment, and one of the elephants in the room is there is white flight that is happening in the community. So we have to figure out too, how do we keep folks here? And some has to do with our schools, and I want our teachers to have the best environment to work with our children. So sitting down and listening to your concerns, and I've written them down, we have work to do, but we have to start someplace. And the flexibility, when Dr. Grover was saying, there's that flexibility. We have to start somewhere. And I know there's concerns about Harrison and the West Side, but we also have to look at where are folks moving, and we're questioning too, why are they moving out of our core area to the outskirts of Cedar Rapids? What is that about? And I think that's so important that, you know, we can't solve it all, but we have to step back and look and say, why are folks in the city moving out further? And I think we need to get that figured out. I think it's great we have the affordable housing that is happening and the units that you're building, but how do we keep, and even Del, when you said by the McKinley, what do we need to do to that area? To keep, what do we need to do? And I think that's important too. So those are my comments. I hope that this is not our last meeting, because we do need to work together. We're all here for the same reason. For this community, Cedar Rapids, for it to grow and to thrive, and for our children to do well, and just to do well here. And we want what is best. Right now, we have to start, because eventually if we keep delaying and delaying, our schools are in need of repair. I mean, we can keep patching, but we just have to think about what is best for this community.
I just wanted to make some quick comments. What's clear to me in all this conversation here tonight has been, and it's been clear to me, I think for a while, just talking with people in the community, is that there is broad support for a plan for investing in our schools, whatever the size of the bond issue is. I think we can get something passed, like Councilmember Todd said, but I think it needs to be the right projects. And just kind of talking about the timeline, you know, this has been such a productive conversation. I really appreciate what the council members have said about the West Side. I'm an East Side person, and I moved my family, you know, to a core neighborhood on the East Side, but I started, you know, when I first moved here and started working, I was working on the West Side, got to know the West Side very well. And so I take it as true, everything you guys are saying, that really stands out as something we need to focus on. But looking at the timeline, we saw earlier, you know, we're trying to approve this plan, the ballot language, on August 7th, you know, less than 2 weeks from today. And I just think it's too quick. I mean, where are our other municipal partners in this conversation? We've got 3 schools in Hiawatha up there. There's Growth north of Hiawatha and Robbins. Those people need to be at the table as well. I think we'd have productive conversations there as well. Our partners at Lynn County, you know, Lynn County has a resiliency office. Having a school in a neighborhood, like you talked about, Councilmember Poe, as like a hub neighborhood, that helps build resiliency in the neighborhood, in the community. So if we're talking about shutting down middle schools, elementary schools, that's a conversation we need to be having with Lynn County about that part of resiliency. And when you talk about transportation, that's how kids get to and from school. That's in part a public health question. That's another question we could be asking to our partners at Lynn County. But if we're going to approve ballot language on August 7th, and I know that if we wanted to move forward in this for this election season, we would really need to do it at that time, because given the number of signatures that need to be gathered, I don't see how they could get it done if we moved it any farther back. But I just don't know how we can be comfortable, given the concerns raised tonight, moving forward with an election this year. And so the way I would say it is, I would rather have the right projects and something that has broader community support in 2038, pushing the election to next year, rather than trying to rush it forward to get it done in 2037. We're not talking about the kids necessarily in school today. We're talking about the future. This is a long-term investment, and so you want to get it right. And so that's just how I would view it. Like I said, I know that there's broad support for this. I think if we were to push it to the next election, that's a conversation we should have of how feasible that is. I think that would give us a chance to have more conversations like this as cities, invite our other municipal partners in, have a meeting downtown at City Hall, have a meeting at school buildings, so people really can come in and get a sense that we're taking this seriously, that this is a project for the entire community with these specific goals, and not just rush forward to, as Councilmember Olson said, when you look at the chunks, the biggest chunk is going to be that new school on the north side. And maybe we do need a new school on the north side, but if we rush forward, people are going to look at that and say, why, that's not my neighborhood. Why should I raise my own taxes to pay for that? And so that would be my suggestion. I think, what I'm hearing from council members is they would like more time to really look at this. And so that's something I would support us doing.
Yeah, I would say I appreciate this opportunity. I strongly feel that the more time I listen, the more I learn. So I came here with that expectation that I would do a lot less talking, a lot more listening. I feel strongly that investment in our school is right, and it's right now, and that the investment in our schools is great for our city. It really bothers me when I hear people talking about how much they love other places. I am absolutely proud to live in Cedar Rapids. Grew up on the East Coast, moved here for college. Don't plan on leaving. I'm extremely proud of all the work that's happening with people in this room and people that aren't in this room. I think this is a phenomenal opportunity for us. I think few people have alluded. Don't expect this to be the last conversation with this group. As Director Merschbrock said, I think that we need more conversations like this that are collaborative in nature. There's a lot of people in this community that I see in my work with entrepreneurs that want to help. And I know that they want to help in the work that we're talking about. I think we're all here today because we want to move forward, make progress for this city, and we want to do it together. We don't agree 100%, that is for sure, right? But there are certainly lots of places for us to find some agreement. So, looking at the plan that we have and how do we continue to make improvements, I think that's been the design the whole time, right? We heard about this just a week and a half ago. There's been improvements to it today, and I would suspect that when we meet again on Monday, we'll see continued improvement. So my hope is that these conversations continue, and honestly, rather frequently. There's lots of things that are happening, and they're moving quick. There's lots of people that feel that we're moving in the wrong direction. So for us to aggressively move in the right direction, I think, is something that I fully support.
Not to put you on the spot, but what are the next steps for us to be involved?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, listening to action. I heard loud and clear when Councilwoman Vernorni spoke. Communication in the past was certainly subpar. So there's opportunities for improvement there. We heard before that the work on the facilities master plan, though it felt like there were a lot of people involved, I've certainly heard from people that they don't feel like their voice was truly heard. So for us to look at the way those committees are set up, ways that we can improve that, I think you'll see more communication, right? It bothers me to hear that there's lots of things that people don't know, right? I would tell you that there's lots of things that are shared. They're not necessarily always shared in the right place where it gets access to everybody. So first and foremost, better communication. I would tell you that I am proud of the work of the school board in electing Dr. Grover. I think she is the right person for this school district right now. Spent a lot of time with fellow board members, listening to the community. So I do feel that this plan, and certainly the strategic plan that we were talking about at our last board meeting, is well-intentioned, and a lot of thought has gone into it, a lot of listening of what's needed. But the truth is, there's lots of things that we need to start working on. So there's no shortage of work, and that's why it's going to take all of us working together. There are a lot more action items that I think are going to come from the notes that have been taken here. But again, identifying the problem is certainly one part. Being solutions oriented and agreeing that we all want to work together to make progress, I think, is something that we should all see as part of those next steps.
And one of the questions we ask often at the city is, what does great look like? And I'd love to get some of us in the room when you talk about the land challenges and getting creative about, us maybe even having some input in that creativity. We'd welcome that too.
Yep.
What's the pie in the sky look like?
Yep. The more often we talk about some of those constraints that I think are not obvious, right? I mean, there's, as far as how much land do you actually need to build an elementary school or middle school, where can you put it? So the comment about skyscraper schools, there's certainly places in this country that are building up because they can't build out. So what does that actually do? So again, I appreciate Director Newman's comments about being creative. I think that it absolutely requires creativity. And Councilman Olson, appreciate the conversation about innovation, because there is so much to be proud of in this city, and I think that we should be focused on that and how do we do more of that, because I can tell you that some of our recent hires have told me at the welcome recession that Cedar Rapids really is a shining star. When we go out across the state, there are a lot of people talking about Cedar Rapids in a very positive way. I think we're hard on ourselves because we live in it. Maybe it's the humbleness. I don't know exactly what it is, but we need to really kind of celebrate the things that we are proud of, identify those opportunities for improvement, and let's keep moving forward. So,
Great. Thank you.
Again, thank you so much, Mayor O'Donnell, Dr. Grover, for helping to promote this idea of getting our groups together in one room. I expect it will be the first of many conversations. So thank everyone for their time tonight. With no further business, we stand adjourned. Did you want to? Oh my God, yeah, sorry.